Hi everyone. Just a few weeks ago, you guys completed an assignment in which you had the opportunity to watch about 3.5 hours of video that talked about the evolution of the microcomputer. That series was part of a PBS presentation explaining how we went from mainframes and large servers to microcomputers that sit on our desk every day. You might have noticed that the video really stopped in terms of its chronological order in around 1995. And at that point in time, Microsoft and Apple were battling each other in determining who is going to be the software and hardware revolution leader of the millennium. Today, we're here in 2010, 15 years later from the end of that. And the reason that video stops at that point in time is we start to see an expansion of something different, something not hardware related or direct software related as we know it, but instead the rise of the internet revolution. Think back to 1995, if you can. In 1995, in my own situation, I was in 7th grade at Algonquin Junior High School. 7th grade is a difficult time for a lot of people. It's kind of the coming of age time. It's when sometimes people have growth spurts. It's when other people have the prevalence and awareness of body odor, as we know in some of our classrooms. And it's also when some different things happen in terms of how we interact with individuals in our communities. For example, in 7th grade and even in 6th grade, we start to see an expansion of relationships. We start to see boys interacting more with girls. We start to see boys and girls interacting in a different way with adults. Maybe somewhat of a not collegial, happy way, but in a way in which they start to define themselves as individuals, define themselves as leaders in their own lives. Sometimes those could be called rebels or unruly children. But anyway, we start to see changes. And that was exactly what was happening when I was going through my junior high time. It's a little different, though, for myself, based on my family background and things of that nature. We were heavily involved in church, of course, and heavily involved in music. So I was kind of one of the better kids. But when I was at school, it was different than when I was at home. When I was at school, I got involved in clubs, like many of us did. And at that time, computers were still just becoming commonplace in education. I was in a public school district that was fairly, I wouldn't say affluent, but fairly on top of things. And in 7th grade, we only had one computer with access to the internet. Just one computer. And that computer was an old Macintosh LC580, which was kind of one of those first all-in-one units by Apple. A real nice unit. It had CD-ROM drives, which had come out probably 2-3 years before that in commonplace education. But that one computer had access to the internet, and what was happening was a lot of people were starting to get internet access at home as well. AOL was starting to, well, actually, AOL transitioned from America Online to what we know now as AOL in the abbreviated form, and we started to see other internet services surface, such as CompuServe, Prodigy, and we also started to see our first aspects of what we called ISPs, Internet Service Providers, but not the commercial ones, localized community ones. One in the northwest suburbs was called Avenue, and it was specifically kind of supported by educational institutions. Another one we saw in the DeKalb area was called TBCnet, and I'm sure there were other ones in Chicago that you guys became aware of. Again, all these internet service providers had one thing really in common, and that was that they were dial-up based. So a lot of people went home and they played on the computer, played on the internet. You know, it was cool just to kind of search for things and find different things that you couldn't find without looking in a book or a magazine before. And if you didn't have those subscriptions or you didn't have the actual books, you couldn't get access to them. You were having to go to the public library and things of that nature. And as that year of 1995 went on, we got into 1996, and at that point, we really saw an explosion of the internet because of one key thing, and that was that America Online changed their plans from it used to be a $20 plans for 20 hours of internet access. They changed their plan around 96 to an unlimited plan where you could download and you could surf the web for as long as you wanted. And the only thing you were charged for in addition was your normal line charges. When that happened, we started to see more and more kids having access to their computer at home and not being restricted to maybe only 30 minutes or an hour a week because the parents had to pay, between $1.99 or $2.95 an hour was the America Online charges, which really was the most popular service. That's why I keep referring to it. But when that happened, we saw an explosion of kids' use and how kids and what kids did on the computer. We started to find that as the commonplace for communication. Instead of calling on the telephone and talking with only one person, because generally kids didn't know how to do three-way calling, we found that kids were having more and more conversations with multiple people in the same exact workspace and at the same time through the use of AOL Instant Messenger. Now, there were competing products such as ICQ chat or IRC chat, Internet Relay Chat. We also saw Yahoo Messenger come up, which is now, I think, and then also MSN Messenger. And all of those individual services. So you used AOL to get to the internet, and then you use these supplemental services to do things. Those started to become the commonplace instead of interpersonal human interaction. Instead of going and meeting up places, you started to make all those plans over the internet. We used to do this in older days by maybe running next door to the people and actually talking to them about making plans and then setting the date for when those plans were going to commence, or we used the telephone. So here, in essence, we actually were using the telephone still because we had dial-up connections. But instead of having to talk to one person and then talk to the next, we could use chat rooms and we could use instant messaging and do it all at one point in time, all in a collective situation. So shortly after that, we started to see an expansion of what I'm going to refer to as broadband internet. And originally, some of them were very highly priced. DSL started originally at $79 for a very, very small transmission amount. The difference was when we started to see broadband internet and broadband over the power lines through, back then it was home, or at home was the designee. Trying to think, there's TCI, then it went to AT&T, and AT&T had the home network, then AT&T switched to AT&T BI, AT&T Broadband Internet, and then it switched to Comcast. Sorry, there's so many different options there. But anyway, when the broadband came, the price severely dropped for that quick access, and there wasn't a need for additional infrastructure. You didn't have to have someone come to your house to do anything. It was already set if you had cable television service. So again, as all of these things started happening, our access to the internet got stronger. Our use of the internet for collaboration got more commonplace in our daily lives. And then what we started to see was a transformation of the internet. Instead of looking at the World Wide Web as defined by your service provider. For example, when you connected to AOL, you actually connected through an AOL interface and you got to see their kind of internal World Wide Web. Same thing in CompuServe, same thing in Prodigy. That quickly started to transition in the 2000s as the simple internet. Your web browser became your primary connection to the internet, not a secondary service provider. And when that started to happen, people and companies realized that, we really need to better utilize websites. We need to be able to use them for more things. We need to be able to communicate more effectively using those sites. And we need to get people to continue to come back, so that we can show advertisements and get revenue from that, so that we can track who's accessing our website so we can better market to those populations. And more importantly, so that we can get more and more people coming to our website so that we can be seen as one of the best websites out there. And that's where Yahoo started to really become popular as a search engine, where Alta Vista kind of went by the wayside, and where Google started to come up. So that's just a little overview on transitioning that bridge from where the video left us to where we're going to now. Our next step is figuring out how exactly the websites or our internet communication has changed that's going to help us as educators.